Snafu is a podcast that contains adult themes and language. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome to Snap Food, where the situation's normal, all fucked up. This is the podcast where we tell you stories of true crime, true mystery, and truly fucked up shit that happens to us every single day, and then we just forget about it. So we decided we'd remind you. I'm the Baroness de Risque.
And I'm Ron Burgundy?
No, actually I'm Shannon, and...
I'm Ron Burgundy?
That's Corey. No,
Rick.
that's
I'm Rick Tamlin.
Okay, this is Shannon and...
Corey.
Yeah, and thank you. Welcome back. We're glad you guys are back here with us. And cheers to everybody.
Yeah, welcome back, guys. So we know that last episode got pretty heavy, so we're going to kind of keep it a little bit lighter this time.
The best that we can,
Yeah.
which isn't the greatest of promises.
It's snack food, you know. We know what we're in for, and you guys know what you guys are in for, so...
But I do want to apologize. I got a little emotional, but, you know, it surprised me. I wasn't prepared for when I read it like that it would, like, hit me like that. I knew this story in and out, and then to read it out loud.
When you say it out loud, it changes the story. It changes the knowledge of it.
Yeah, and actually a couple of you guys reached out to me and said, I'm sorry you got so emotional, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, even my dad, it was my dad's first episode of ever listening to.
Of course it is.
Of course. He asked me, of course, like, weeks ago, and I was like, listen to one of the later episodes, Dad. Like, the quality's a little bit better. And so he waited a couple weeks after that and then listened to this one and told me, he's like, I listened all the way up until you started to cry, and then I had to turn it off because he's my dad.
Yeah,
you know?
that tends to be what happens.
But, so this week we'll try and keep it a little bit lighter. It still was a pretty important story to tell, though, I think.
Yeah, it definitely was. It needed to be told. But, yeah, this week we're going to kind of go on something a little bit different.
But before that, again, we asked you guys for your snack food stories, and a couple of you guys have really come through, and I'm really excited. We just would like to get a few more before we get an episode together, and of course, because it's such a new thing, we've had to ask, like, family and friends, and those people have really stepped up, too, but I'm excited to say that even my grandpa wrote, like, a little bit of story, and it's about his time growing up in World War II, and it's exciting what people are willing to tell you when you ask them. So I'm really getting excited and stoked about, like, what's going to happen with these.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun to tell all these stories because, like I said, I live the most boring life. So hearing everyone else's not boring life is pretty nice.
Yeah.
But this week we're doing like I said, we're going to kind of not be so heavy. Actually, this episode came across because I've been watching way too much TV and watching my cats. And so when you look, like, I've been watching, obviously, not obviously, you guys don't know this, I'm a big Star Wars fan.
Yeah, Corey definitely is. He's, like, I haven't been the biggest fan of that, but it's growing on me.
Yeah, I try to make you watch it. I think I still have one or two for you to watch. But when you're watching that, you know, you've got Luke and Leia, and they're twins, and they've got this weird connection. I mean, granted, it's the Force and Jedi, but... If you watch other shows, too, I've been watching the show called The Gifted, which is on one of those channels. I think Fox. I watch on Hulu.
Yeah, who knows? Everybody our age watches things on, like, Netflix or Hulu. Like, we don't know what a network even is anymore.
But it's a show that's... And if you guys haven't seen it, it's a show that's based in the X-Men universe. And there are these two siblings that, you know, they are able to kind of visit each other in their dreams. When they're closer to each other, their powers are stronger. So I wonder where all these weird stories of siblings, because I've got a brother and we don't read each other's minds normally.
Yeah, because you're just brothers.
Yeah, but, you know, we're not anything special. You know, where all these kind of facts come from, like what brings these stories of weird sibling connections, and especially twin connections, to the table.
Okay.
And through that, we kind of threw together this episode with, you know, just kind of about where twins come from, or not where twins come from. It's kind of about just, like, the weird connections that twins have. And to give a little bit of a background on that, obviously everyone should know, or, you know, you might know, that there's two different kinds of twins. You get the identical twins, which are two people coming from the same egg that splits during birth. I don't try to even be a biologist.
I'm so excited because Corey's actually going to talk about the medical side of this, and his cheeks are already starting red. Like, he hates anything to do with the human body.
I hate everything. I hate the human body. But, so you've got identical twins that are from the same fertilized egg, and it splits, and then you get 2 people for the price of 1. Sorry,
so can
parents.
a boy and a girl twin be identical twins?
No, because they're genetically the same, which is something that's going to play into the story I'm going to be telling in a little bit.
Okay.
But they're genetically the same. So you test their DNA and everything, and it's exactly the same. But then you've got the fraternal twins, which are 2 embryos that are formed from 1 zygote. So it happens at the same time of fertilization, but it forms 2 embryos as opposed to like 1 embryo splitting in 2. And then you get 2 people still. And sorry, parents, if you only wanted 1 because that's all you could afford, you got 2.
Surprise! I know a family filled with triplets.
Sorry about your wallet.
But my side of the family, like my family has like a couple of twins out there. Like my cousins, I have 1 set of twins. My grandfather is a twin.
We don't have any twins in not that I know of. I don't have any twins in my family.
I don't know. I think once it hits a family, you can always at least expect it to pop up every couple generations.
And that's something that you think about too. And again, that comes up in my story in a little bit as well. We return to that point. But you look at it. So you got identical twins that they're going to be genetically the same, and there'll be a few different changes between like freckles and shit because that's more an environmental thing, like getting suntans, rather than a genetic thing as freckles.
Do you think you could ever have puppy twins?
That's called a litter. I mean, maybe. Who knows? Maybe. And the fraternal twins are like when you have like Luke and Leia would be fraternal twins because they're not exactly the same. They came from the same time though, and then they're twins. I'm so shit at explaining this stuff. But you've got twins.
No, tell us again. What are they? Twins?
Twins.
You say?
They're twins. So it's
okay.
like the movie Twins, where you have Arnold Schwarzenegger and Dan DeVito.
And then one has a baby.
What?
Oh wait, no, that's another movie they did together.
Movie. But you know the movie I'm talking about, where Arnold is super strong and super successful. I always thought
that movie was extra fucked up in my brain. Like, why were they twins and they had a baby? Like, a guy had a baby, but no, I think they separated those.
Yeah,
same actors.
Oh yeah, probably. But, so you got it popping up in pop culture all the time, and you always have siblings and twins, especially, that they can read each other's minds, or they, if someone is hurt, like, miles and miles away, they notice it.
Well, it's like an innate thing with twins that we expect. Like, they seem to be closer than regular siblings because we almost expect them to have to be the same person.
Yeah. And
some of them spend so much time together that I think they do have this interconnectedness to one another where maybe like they know when something's wrong, or it's just something about them that makes them closer to one another.
And it could just be that whole natural aspect of they were in the womb together. They're each other's first friend, they're each other's first playmate, so they kind of go back all the way to their entire life together, aside from like 3 minutes here or there on one of them.
And that is weird, because I'm thinking about, like, when you say, well, they go back all the way, I first thought, like, all the way through history was my first jump in thought.
No, I'm just talking about all through their life,
But we're not the first people to think that twins are weird, or that they might have like supernatural abilities.
No, it pops up elsewhere too. Culture.
It pops up all the way through culture, all the way through like history. Like, honestly, I think the main first twins I ever think about are the twins that began Rome.
Oh yeah, Romulus
and
Remus, I want to say.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's Romulus and Remus, and
Don't quote us.
And they started quote unquote Rome.
And I've heard throughout like other cultures, like sometimes twins aren't always looked down upon as like something good. Like they're a symbol of good and bad, or they're duality and man.
Yeah, it's like if you look at Gemini as an astrology sign, you have the good and the bad on it, the light and the dark, and that's kind of what some people see in twins a lot of times.
In reality, I think after our cats are being complete jerks.
And so with that duality, you look at, not necessarily pop culture, you look at folklore, right? And all around the world, people are seeing twins. You look at even just like the Greeks. Everyone knows the Greeks. You've got Apollo and Artemis, who are twins of
light and dark.
Right, but they're the children of Zeus and Leto, and one represents the moon, Artemis, and one represents the sun, Apollo. It's not necessarily an evil duality, it's just a duality. But it can get evil from everything you see, different cultures. The Native Americans weren't necessarily a big fan of having twins.
Actually, I saw that there was quite a few of their gods in their culture that had twins. I mean, for the Wabanaki people, you have Glooskap and Malsumis. You know, you have a lot of duality, I think, with the sun and the moon, but normally they're lovers, so those aren't their twins. But the Iroquois, sons of the Iroquois sky goddess, she had twins. So throughout Native American folklore, there are a lot of twins that do pop up, and I wouldn't say that they necessarily represent any kind of bad.
Right, and that's the thing. Sometimes it's not necessarily bad, but then you also have other cultures that'll look on the darker side of everything, and that one twin is evil, one twin's good.
Well, when it comes to the essential, like, Christianity, like, break it down, Christianity, Jewish, like, what came before Jewish, you have a lot of Zoroastrian.
Oh, yeah, that's
and
right.
They are the essential beginning of twins. They're twins of opposing forces, good and evil. It's like Ihamen and Ahura Mazda.
Yeah, that's right. Zoom Zoom.
Oh my god. Wow.
Well, I mean, tell me I'm wrong.
It's the best way to remember. But yeah, so like, twins pop up everywhere.
Yeah. You know, so that kind of, it always comes back, and it's still something that we see in our stories today.
No, we love talking about it. We love the unique.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, you hear those stories, like I probably said already, of a twin living 600 miles away from their other twin, and then they get, like, a paper cut or something like that. I know I've heard, you know, you hear these stories in passing all the goddamn time. That's what this podcast is about.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's 100 twins out there just rolling their eyes and, like, I have to hear this shit all the time, every time. I don't give a shit what my brother does. Like, he is him, I am me. You know, I hate this. But the reality of it is it's always really, it catches our interest when there are unique stories. And like I said, when these twins do show these, like, kind of powers, or what we think is powers, like, we can't help but stop and pay attention.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you know, obviously that's a quick and dirty background of what we know about twins, but...
That's your favorite, isn't it? Quick and dirty?
It is. It really is. It's so much cheaper, too. You don't have to pay for anything. And
Ew, you won't pay for that?
No, you rent hotels by the hour, too.
Stop. Okay, go.
So, you know, the intro to this story in my notes here, I have twins are a bit of an oddity, aren't they? Blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of our blah, blah, blah.
Wow, great writing.
Yeah, it's really good. So we're going to tell the story of the Pollock twins. It's either Pollock and...
I mean, it's... Words are just things, man. Just say what you want to say.
Yeah. I'm going to call it Pollock twins. And it's one of those stories that kind of catches everyone in the parapsychology's view. They're like, oh, look at this. It's paranormal and psychology, and let's look into it a little bit more. So let's kind of go all the way back.
Ooh, I like paranormal, like like ghosty and like neat. Okay,
sort
let's
of,
do it.
Yeah. So back in 1920, you know, way long ago in the before times, in the before four, John Pollock is he's born, and he's a member of the Church of England, but then he turns to be a Catholic, and he's born in Bristol. That's one of those UK village city things where they might still have a blacksmith. I'm not sure. So John meets a woman named Florence, and she is part of the Salvation Army, and she eventually marries him and converts to Catholicism. From an early age, John has a very strong interest in reincarnation.
Ooh, I do too.
But he doesn't have a problem with it intersecting with the ideas of Catholicism, of his religion.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I wasn't thinking about that, because most of the time, like, Catholics won't really accept any other, like, outside beliefs.
Yeah.
And they definitely don't believe in, like reincarnation.
No, it just doesn't fit with it, but he believes in it, and he's always kind of out there praying for a sign from God that reincarnation is real. He doesn't see the two beliefs as mutually exclusive, because, you know, reincarnation is obviously like a Buddhist thing.
Well, I think a lot of us are growing up now in like meshing religions. Like, I see it all the time throughout history, and like when one religion's introduced to another, and when religion isn't like forced on a person through the state, like sometimes you feel more free to kind of explore. And I can understand maybe if you're searching for something, like, you kind of feel in your mind and your heart that it's right, but you still want your God to verify that. Like, you still kind of hope that they'll let you know, like, you're not, you know, when you're so deep in your religion, you don't want to go do wrong and start, I don't know. I'm just babbling at this point. Go on.
Yeah, and this family here, they're a bit of breeders. In 1946, Joanna, who's essential to the story, is their third kid and first daughter. She's born in 1946. And after Joanna's born, the family moves out from where they're at to a place called Hexham, which is #1 export is black magic pork.
Excuse me, what now?
It's called Hexham, black magic pork.
Is it magical? Is the bacon delicious?
Oh my God. Yes, it's everything you want to be, also evil pork. They moved from Hexham to Northumberland. And in 1951, Jacqueline is born. She's their fourth child and the second part to this story here. So Joanna and Jacqueline, they're 5 years apart. And they're pretty much raised by Florence's mother, so their maternal grandmother. Because Florence and John, they have this grocery business and milk delivery business. So they're working very hard on that, the two older sons. So the two girls are always around with their grandmother.
It's like taking care of through the village. Like you're raising your kids with all your family.
Yeah, and it's the 20th century is what happens. People have to work.
Yeah.
So the two girls are always together. And it's always shown that they share this very, very strong bond, with Joanna being very mothering towards her younger sister, and Jacqueline kind of just accepting it, so much so that they just kind of protect each other. They used to play dress-up. Joanna loved playing dress-up and putting on costumes and putting on plays together. They enjoyed kind of combing each other's hair, and especially combing their father's hair.
Well, it's a little girl thing.
Okay.
Abby, stop braiding my mops. But they're so pretty.
That's another set of twins we didn't discuss. Andy and Ollie, guys, are twins from Bob's Burgers, and they're weird.
Yeah, they're just weird. Like, they feel each other. Like, I felt your wallet getting taken out of your pocket or something like that.
And their belly buttons fit each other.
Oh, stop.
Yeah, belly buttons are the most disgusting thing in the world. But they like combing their father's hair. And also, Joanna's the type of girl who makes creepy child statements that are just matter-of-fact and bold. Like, saying that she's never going to grow up to be a lady. Because that's not unsettling when your child says that.
I mean, that might have been something that's okay. Like, some girls don't want to grow up to be the princess.
It wasn't necessarily that she didn't want to. It's just more that she's not going to.
Oh.
The parents actually listen to everything. These parents are very, very good. They listen to everything their kids say. When Jackie, the youngest of the two, is around 3 years old, she fell and hit her head on a bucket. And it caused a gash above her right eye that kind of goes from, like, the base of her nose above her eyebrow and across her forehead. It creates a scar. And this is one of those scars that's kind of, like, indented a little bit. And it's very, very obvious in cold weather.
Okay.
Just, another odd thing. And that's a typo. Jacqueline also has a round birthmark on her left hip, just about her waist. It's a dark, mostly round birthmark. And the stuff that, like I said, if you know anything about reincarnation, you're going to be able to take these clues and tie into where I'm going to go with this in a few minutes. Life is actually pretty good for the girls. They spent time with their grandmother, they spent time together, they're playing with their older brothers, and their parents are very attentive. However, disaster does hit this family. And in May of 1957, while walking to church with a friend, they were struck by a car.
Oh, no.
And, and...
The whole family?
No, just the two, Jacqueline, Joanna, and a friend.
Still, damn.
Apparently, this woman was ODing. She was taking aspirin and barbiturates.
Oh, no.
And trying to commit suicide by driving. Her kids had just gotten taken away by the court system.
That doesn't mean you go out and kill people with your car.
She didn't necessarily try to kill the kids. She's just getting herself OD'd and start driving to see what happens.
Okay, you know what? You guys, if you OD, let's never take any kind of substance and drive. That's the key word.
In my notes here, I have, this is a very shitty idea.
Sorry, it's not laughable. It's sad. But yeah, Jesus, don't do that.
Yeah. And, the car comes off the road and it heads right for the girls. And, I hate saying terms like this, but the reports of it said, quote, the girls were tossed like cricket balls.
Oh, nobody should report it like that.
Into the air, and that the girls were both killed instantly.
Oh, man, what a shit reporter.
And this accident kind of comes all over the news in Great Britain, especially when they're trying to do the inquest and the trial of the woman who drove. And Florence is just desperately trying to move on from this. She does her best to kind of throw herself into her work a little bit, but John's not letting his girls go. John's making sure that he spends some time praying to God about his girls, seeing if he can get any sign that they're okay. he's got these radical views that they're desperate punishment for his beliefs. As much as he doesn't have an issue with it being mutually exclusive, like going to heaven and reincarnation, he thinks at one point that maybe because he's believing in reincarnation, God's punishing him and his wife.
So no, he doesn't believe it's okay. Like, he believes maybe God's punishing him now.
I think in 30 years, his beliefs have changed a little bit. And while he still has, it still doesn't really deter him from his belief in reincarnation, because he gets to a point where he feels that there's still going to be an answer about his girls, and that the girls will be born back into the family.
Well, that's a far stretch.
And this is kind of a thought process that threatened his marriage to Florence. She just wasn't having any of this crackpot idea. She's a lot more realist than her husband was. However, they kind of work through it, and she eventually becomes pregnant again. And this kind of kept fueling the fire because...
You think he was trying to get her pregnant?
I think that's kind of why people have sex most of the time.
Ew, no, it's not.
I mean, not for me. Kids are terrifying.
No, okay. I'm just saying, like, this is weird. Like, I would be suspicious now if you knew your husband wanted your children to come be reincarnated. Like, now his sole purpose is just to, like, use you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know about that because, they go to the doctors and, John is totally in the belief that his girls are going to be born again as twins. But Florence rejects this idea. Because
common sense, yeah.
And because doctors and science also disproved it. They find one heartbeat, and, they're doing the checkups, and they're only able to find one heartbeat, one person in there. And there's no history of twins in either of the families. So like you're saying, like, you get a family that has twins, and twins will pop up every few generations, possibly. There's no history of twins in either of these two families, for John or Florence. But on October 4th in 1958, Jillian and Jennifer were both born into the world. 2 twin girls.
Oh, that's creepy. My story has 2 J's, too.
Joanna, Jacqueline, Jillian, and Jennifer are the 4 names that we're going to be going through.
Oh, no.
It's the worst in the coming parts of the story. It's been the worst to just kind of, like, keep my shit organized. I always went to a point where I'm just like, okay, this is child 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay, so now that I screwed everything up, go ahead and remind me. So Mom is
Florence, Dad is John.
Okay, and now the 2 baby twins that were just born are...
Jillian and Jennifer.
Okay.
The 2 girls that died are Joanna and Jacqueline, and the 2 sons probably have a J sound, but I never learned their names.
So the 2 twins are...
Jillian and Jennifer.
Okay, go on.
So... it's one of those weird situations that no one saw it, and they're identical twins. They broke from the same zygote, but there's a few interesting aspects, and we're just going to go right into the physical similarities here because it's the quickest and easiest. When they clean up the babies, Jennifer actually has the same scar over her eye that Jacqueline had.
Scar, or she has a birthmark?
She has a birthmark where Jacqueline had a scar.
And that's like a common belief in a lot of cultures.
That's part of what I'm going to get into in a little bit.
Are you going to say it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And she also has a birthmark on her waist about the same size and location that Jacqueline had. And like I said, the twins are actually identical twins, so they're the same genetics. As a result,
So then why would they have different... You can't have different birth
Exactly.
marks.
And that's something that doctors, they just can't explain that. They're like, that's weird, because obviously birthmarks are just like a genetic anomaly, and they're like a weird patch of blood vessels or a weird pigmentation in the skin, but Jennifer is the only one that has it. Jillian doesn't have these 2 weird birthmarks, but they're identical twins. And like Shannon was trying to get ahead of us, for some context here, part of the belief in reincarnation is that someone is reincarnated, the new person or the new body has some of their traits, especially the physical. So birthmarks or scars from the past life. I've seen especially ones where someone was once shot or stabbed in
like however you died. That's what I wanted to say.
And they were born again, and they were like, oh, they believed in reincarnation. Then the baby has like a scar, like a bullet wound at a certain spot.
Yeah, okay. So for instance, on my left hand, I have a little birthmark. And in a lot of beliefs, that would be a mark where I either died for something. Well, okay, birthmark would be because you died from something. But like something on my hand like this would be like, oh, maybe you lost a finger right there in a prior life. And so like now you have a birthmark there.
Yeah, and
I know it's a silly belief, but I can't help but think about it. And so that kind of makes sense. Like, oh, it's not necessarily like the killing blow. Like, here's a mark I just had before.
Yeah. And, for a lot of people who believe in reincarnation, they're looking into this, and it's one of those things that could either just be happy coincidence, or for those who are super true believers, and they're looking really hard for any kind of similarities, they're going to find their quote-unquote proof of reincarnation through these marks.
But those are pretty similar to his kids.
Well, yeah, it's one of the twins has the identical markings of his youngest daughter. And over the course of the next few years, as the kids develop a bit more and they start to become
little people,
I get their help files get installed and they get updated. They have a lot of different similarities to Joanna and Jacqueline. Where, all right, I'm gonna always just kind of try to say it this way. If I say Jillian, I'm also going to kind of always relate her to Joanna. And if I say Jennifer, I'm going to relate her to Jacqueline in all of these statements. If I get confused in it, let's just have that as my PSA. So I'd play the ding ding music.
What we have to do is, as soon as we put the episode out and you listen to it, keep track of how many times Corey messes up and then write us an email. In the next episode, I will force him to take that many shots.
No.
As a repercussion for messing up his story. Now you have to get it right, okay?
Right.
So make sure you write in, and then I will force him to do tequila.
Oh, God
Let's
damn it.
do this,
We're gonna
and
die.
go.
So, like I said, while the kids are growing up, they start to have a lot of different similarities to Joanna and Jacqueline from the age of 3 to 7. 3 to 7 of Joanna and Jacqueline, not necessarily the twins.
Number 1.
So, I'm not going to number. I don't have it written like that, because you've seen my notes before and you've yelled at me for doing it that way. Anyway, the parents, at one point when the girls are young, the parents bring out a box of toys that they put away after the old sisters died. They wrapped, put in the attic, and they hadn't, this is the first time they'd taken the toys out. And they're looking at the toys, and Jillian would always claim the toys that belonged to Joanna. And Jennifer claimed the toys that belonged to Jacqueline. And, they both recognize these toys. They didn't fight over them, and apparently, according to some psychology shit, that's what kids do. They fight over toys because they're little brats.
I mean, it's just an innate, you don't have that much empathy for others, so your senses tell you to go get the best stuff that you like the most.
Right, and, they recognize that these toys, the parents gave them the toys, but they're constantly saying that the toys came from Santa, which is where these toys originated from. When the first two girls, Joanna and Jacqueline, got these toys, it was given to them by Santa, but when Jillian and Jennifer got them, it was given to them by their parent. But then they claimed toys that belonged to their past life, let's start saying. Even so much that Jacqueline is looking over at, a toy clothes wringer, which is to pretend to clean doll clothes, I guess. And she's like, oh, that's my toy wringer that Santa brought me. Like I said, kids are fucking creepy when they say shit, and they just say their mind. And if you're John, who's believing in reincarnation, I bet... The thing is, also another PSA, John never brings up his belief in reincarnation until the girls are about 13 years old.
Well, do they know that they had sisters that died?
I mean, you can't necessarily hide something like that, but
Some people do, though.
The parents, and we're going to kind of get into that in a little bit, too, towards the end of my story. But, John never told the girls that he was really into the idea of reincarnation, and they tried not to tell too many of these stories to the girls. And there's some other creepy shit that goes on, because they step into similar roles to the previous girls. Jillian becomes very, very mothering to Jennifer, the same way Joanna was to Jacqueline. And, Jennifer was just kind of very into it. She's like, okay, let's do that.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, this is my life now. I have Jillian as my mother. There's a point where Jennifer's laying with her head in Jillian's lap, and Jillian's looking down at her, and she's saying that she's seeing Jennifer's eyes covered in blood, and pointing and saying, that's where the car hit you.
Oh my God.
And this is Florence walking in to hear this. I'm like, no, nope. And another...
Do you just stop and then moonwalk out of the room? I feel like that
that's what
rewinds
I'm picturing
time.
Florence doing, wiping a dish because it's the 50s and she's a housewife, and she's not working. She didn't... Okay.
Oh my God, you ruined the joke. Keep going.
Anyway, and then just walks backwards out. There's another point where Jillian points out the birthmark on Jennifer's head and says, this is the mark that Jennifer got when she fell into the bucket. Now, Jennifer never fell into a bucket. It was Jacqueline in the past life who fell into the bucket. And they never told anyone about the scars in the bucket. That's not something that's going to come up. But Jillian's like, oh, that's where Jennifer fell into a bucket. And Jennifer never fell into a bucket. There's another creepy thing that's happening. So after the car accident, Florence actually stopped working. She stayed at home. They didn't need to have the extra income.
Yeah, I can totally understand a mother who doesn't have to work, like being able to stay home, like just staying home after something so terrible. I wouldn't want to have to work either.
So, she stays at home, and she had this smock that she would wear when they were delivering milk. And, before the girls were even born, it's up in the attic or something like that. It's put away. The girls have never seen this damn thing. Until one day, John, he takes a smock out and he wears it while he's painting. And Jennifer calls him out on it. She's like, why are you wearing Mommy's coat? And then she's also getting pissed off that Jillian, the one who kind of relates to Joanna, doesn't recognize the coat. But the thing is that Joanna would have been in school most of the time that Florence was wearing this coat at work. Jacqueline, the younger of the two sisters, would have seen it. So it's a gap in knowledge that the one twin would have that the other doesn't, and they're getting upset about it. John is asking Jillian, why do you know this coat? Where do you know this coat from? And she's like, oh, that's when Mommy would used to deliver milk. And again, it's one of those items that just was put away and they never brought it out.
Yeah, so why would you ever tell your kid I wore this jacket when I used to deliver milk?
That's not something that would come up. It's just like, oh, it's my old coat. Yeah. It's my old work coat. You wanted to say, oh, it's my old coat I deliver milk in. There's another part, like I said, Florence has been home all these girls' lives, but they got really close to her mother, looking to her mother for advice.
The grandma.
Yeah, their grandmother. The same way that Joanna and Jacqueline were kind of raised by their grandmother. Jillian and Jennifer. Also, please, just for the record, guys, if you have more than 3 kids, don't give them all the same fucking first sound. Anyway.
They do it on purpose so that you could just be like, Jay, get in here. And then you see the guilty one walk in first, and you're like, got him.
Probably. And, so they're always going to their grandmother for advice, even though they always have their mother at home. It's just another one of those oddities that's kind of a very similar thing to the old family. And right after the twins were born, about 9 months after the twins were born, they left Hexham and moved somewhere else. They just moved away to a different part of Great Britain. And at about 4.5 years old, they come back to Hexham to visit, and the girls are kind of skipping ahead in a creepy, I'm assuming, in my head I'm picturing it as like they're dressed identical, they're skipping and singing a creepy song.
The Shining.
I've seen The Shining way too many times.
Yeah, that's all I ever think of is The Shining.
Anytime I picture twins, I picture The Shining. Anyway, the girls are kind of walking ahead, and the parents are asking where they're going. They're like, oh, we're going to go to the park down the road and across the street. And they start walking like they know exactly where they're going to go. And they're like, we're going to cross the street and go on the swings. These girls had never been to Hexham, but it was a park that Joanna and Jacqueline had always played at. So it's another one of those creepy knowledge things that these girls would have no reason, even if you're telling someone the direction so they're blue in the face at 4 years old, they're not going to know how to navigate to where they want to go.
Yeah.
And they just kind of go and they just head to the park like they knew where the park was. And it didn't unsettle anybody, apparently. Like I said, we have these like weird oddities and these weird gaps in knowledge, but also Jillian just has a lot of Joanna's traits. From a young age, Jillian was always a bit more mature than her twin Jennifer. She had a love of costumes and plays at an early age. She was much more giving in nature than her sister. And that's definitely something that's a Joanna-Jacqueline thing that kind of gets passed off on these twins. And even more so, these twins have a phobia of cars. So much so that they're walking down an alley and there's a car that's kind of heading down towards them, but not like at them. And like, oh my god, the car's coming right for us. And they were like, they get paralyzed with fear and hug each other. So they didn't like cars too much. There are some aspects when they started learning to write and draw that pop in. When they were at school, Jacqueline was like 7 years old by the time she died, and she's trying to hold a pen and trying to write. But instead of holding a pencil like you would, like in between like your two fingers and your thumb, she's holding it in her fist, like up and down. And they're trying to convert that, and like
a little kid, yeah,
like a little kid. But it's something that even at 7 years old that they're trying to smack out of Jacqueline, for lack of a better term. The teachers were telling the parents that if they see Jacqueline holding the pen the wrong way, to slap her hand so she puts it in the right way, just kind of like negative reinforcement.
Is she in Catholic school?
They were both Catholic, yes. So yeah, it fits. Anyway, Jillian, though, who is more similar to Joanna, was holding a pencil right every single time. And Jennifer, who's more similar to Jacqueline, was holding it...
She's afraid of the penguin from Blues Brothers.
Essentially. She's holding the pen the wrong way. And she does that until she's about 7 years old. And then even into her like young adult life, there would be times where she'd just revert to holding the pen that way. And there's this one guy who he wrote this book volume called quote, reincarnation in biology, a contribution to the etiology of birthmarks and birth defects. And he started showing up in the family's lives when the girls were about 7 years old. He's talking to John, he's talking to Florence until she passes away in 1978.
How old is she?
She's born in the 20s sometime to 78, so 50-something or another.
Oh, she was pretty young.
John dies in 85, so he was 65 when he died. The girls are still living and off doing stuff, but Ian Stevenson was writing this chapter, and he was kind of contacting the family, and he's just asking about these types of things, and checking in with the family. Even after Florence dies, he's contacting John, and especially Jillian, because she has the birthmarks that are very similar to her deceased sister. At a certain point in their young adult life, like when they're about 10 or so, he reaches out to them. And the girls say that somewhere between 5 and 7, the memories of this past life and of saying these things just kind of faded away, almost like a dream. That they just kind of stopped remembering any kind of past life or remembering these experiences. Though they trusted their father and mother that they had these experiences and that this shit that would happen.
I mean, normally I would be like, oh, okay, so it's bullshit. But this is something you hear a lot with people who talk about past lives, like talking about like children doing things up until a certain age. It's kind of like how people say children might see more than we do up until
they might
like
be psychic
6 or 7. They start blocking off things in their head. Honestly, if you ask me about my childhood, I have little to tell you.
Well, it's the same thing with like imaginary friends. Like they could be a visitor from another plane or some shit. We can get in. We'll have another parapsychology episode.
Yeah, but even like for regular people, like if it just wasn't that important of an event to you, like, oh, I said this, that's neat. Like you might not remember that as you grow up. I get that.
And, even after John, the father, passed away in 85, Ian reaches out to Jillian a little bit later in life. She talks about having these, quote, inner visions of playing with her brothers in a sandpit at a house in Wickham. This is where the family moved from out of Hexham. They moved to Wickham, and then they moved another time.
Okay.
The twins would never lived in Wickham. And she's describing playing in a sandpit with her brothers, which she would have never done. And she can exactly describe the house, like down to these minute details that you would only get if you lived there. And it's just another one of those things that kind of popped up later in life that support this whole reincarnation thing. So this is all kind of very, very strange. Right? You got these two girls that were born together. They very much echo their older sisters that have passed away. It's a bit odd, right? So, people are looking for different explanations. Obviously, we're just kind of talking about this, like, parapsychology of children, which is fucking creepy, but we'll probably cover it in another episode, where they have, like, these dreams, and they have an imaginary friend, or they can kind of see maybe ghosts or something, or they're psychic.
Because kids come up with things that we don't know that they've been associated to, like, things that, like, why would they ever know this if nobody's ever taught them? Like, where did they pick that up at? And I think we're still trying to understand a lot of basic science and understanding of the human body all throughout the different stages of life. And it frustrates us when we can't figure out little kids like that.
Yeah, more and more people are looking into this case. The Pollocks have kind of disappeared off the map for a little bit. I can't find anything recent of their adult life. But other people have been studying these stories. And they're looking for more mundane reasons. They're like, oh, well, there are two girls raised by the same family that raised the two girls who died. So a lot of that could have been just something they heard when they were, like, developing, and they just took it and swallowed it as their own.
Or they're super reincarnated twins from their previous sisters, and their dad willed it so.
And that's the thing. They're like, well, John also had a super strong belief in reincarnation. He wasn't necessarily unbiased. So maybe he's looking very, very closely for these, like, signs of reincarnation. Another one that kind of doesn't really hold too much weight is that while Florence is pregnant for the twins, she's thinking about her past daughters and how it was, like, around their birth and when they died.
I mean, that's the same thing about him willing it so. So if you're saying she thought about them a lot, maybe she did too.
So...
But how could you not think about your previous child?
Yeah, and they're just saying that could have influenced, the pregnancy, and it influenced the girls during it. But, most of the time people are just kind of they're going for, like, the happy coincidence type of route. And people are looking into a lot of these different things. But, no one's actually debunking it as, like, a false story. They're believing that these circumstances are believed by everyone involved and by the people who are researching it. And that maybe it is a legitimate case of reincarnation, or it's just a legitimate case of happenstance. And that's the story of the Pollocks.
That was so weird. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to feel about that.
So yeah, this one's a bit different. I was looking at two different stories. One that doesn't actually end so well, and I'm kind of sick and tired of telling stories that end poorly. Granted, this snafu, but I want to tell one that doesn't necessarily have the story is still going. The twins are still alive, and unless they get hit by a car together and die, I'm a-okay with just letting them live their life. And it was a weird circumstance. So that's the story of the Pollocks. Hooray!
Yay. Nobody, well, cool. Everybody's alive. That's good.
No one died a horrific death. Everyone died of natural causes. Well, aside from the first two girls. But...
Just, right? You never get away from it.
No. Yeah, there's still a hard lesson in that one, but it's not as bad as some of our stories have been.
I don't know. Everybody has their own belief, and I think as you grow, you kind of mold it to, what you've seen and what life's taught you. And I just always had this weird feeling, maybe if you wanted it, God would give it to you. If you really wanted to do another go and learn more about what it means to be human and humility and that kind of stuff, you'd be fine.
I would never want to have to go back through high school years again.
I think a lot of people would just be no. That's why he's okay. That's why I think he'd be you could do it.
Yeah, no, bye. I'm good with not going back through some of that shit.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay. So I want to get on to my story then.
Your turn.
And my turn.
Let's see how terrible this one's going to be and how much I'm not going to want to sleep.
Okay. So my story is it's actually a more current story than yours. And it's more centered on you had twins, but mine is just actual twins. And mine is very, psychological.
All right.
I want you to go ahead, you guys, and take another sip of your drinks and put on your little thinking caps and just start breaking this down as I tell it to you. Because
it's a podcast. I'm not supposed to think during this.
Well, some people do. All right, so we're going to be talking about the children of the immigrants Aubrey and Gloria Gibbons. So Aubrey and Gloria met in Barbados.
Okay.
And then Aubrey joined the Royal Air Force, so the RAF. And that's, very typical all throughout the world. A lot of people here, they marry a man who joins the military, and then what happens is you end up moving around and having a family. And if you're going to move around constantly, it's very hard to actually have a job. So most women are stay-at-home moms. So Gloria ended up being a stay-at-home mom. She first had their daughter Greta, then they had their son David, and then at one point while they were stationed over in Aden, Yemen, which is a very unfortunate place to be stationed, I'm sure. It's probably hot.
Yeah.
Gloria ended up giving birth for the third time to her twins, Jennifer and June.
What is it with people in twins and J names?
J names. And they were born on April 11th, 1963. So these twins are identical girls, and their mother liked to call them twinnies, which I just think is so cute.
Oh, boy.
And like many twins, they interacted with each other in really unique ways that only twins tend to do. So their mother, Gloria, noticed that whatever they wanted to do, they wanted to do it together. All the way from starting from breastfeeding. Yeah. She had it, they would fight each other to do it at the same time. You couldn't let one go before the other, or to be a complete, scream fest.
I guess I don't know how it works, but two boobs.
Well, it's not like that. Can you juggle well?
No.
Yeah, so there you go. And these are fragile. They have soft spots.
Yeah, suicide buttons.
Oh my goodness. Not like they get to choose that. It's just every baby should come with a helmet.
They should, and an instruction manual.
As they get older, they start to mirror each other in their movements because they're always with each other. Everything they want to do is with each other. You spend enough time with each other, you start to kind of do the same movements, and they wanted to do the same movement. Yeah. And they also seemed to, I don't know, their speech got off. So not only did they not speak a lot, but they started to speak strangely, and so people thought a couple of different things. Essentially, a lot of people thought they were doing twin speak, which my baby cousins did when they were little kids. They would used to say words they would add extra O's onto things, and they would just say things that it sounded like Spanish. Yeah, it sounded like babble, but they clearly understood each other. So these girls were saying things, but nobody, even their parents, could really understand what they were saying. And so a lot of people kind of thought maybe it was a mix between Bahamian Creole or a sped up English, or even just a regular twin speak, like their own language together that nobody would figure out.
Could it be just a developmental thing because there's 2 kids at one time?
Well, no. In fact, these girls are incredibly smart.
Okay.
And that's the problem. Like, a lot of people jump to the conclusion that if twins are doing twin speak and refuse to speak to others or refuse to just speak at all, that there's something wrong with them. But there's actually something called selective mutes. And it's just people who choose not to speak. And at first, that sounds like there would be a developmental issue. But there's not. Some people literally just make a decision, and that's it. And once they've made that decision, even at a young age, they find themselves like restricted to it. Like, it's almost like they're incapable of talking to others. So these girls usually just talk to each other, and then they had a younger sister, Rosie, who was just born about 5 years after them, and they would speak to her and she would understand.
Oh, that's weird.
Little kids pick up whatever they hear. So, they were listening. She was listening to it. She got it.
All right.
But the problem is especially with twins, you know how little kids, especially kids who are born of a similar age, where they feel like a stronger bond. Like, sometimes people say, oh, well, I had this kid too far apart from this other one, and now all they do is fight. And then you get some kids who are born like a year or two difference, and they're really like bonded.
Well, it's your earliest friend. It's your earliest like confidant, essentially, type of thing.
Yeah, but you notice when little kids make that bond, like they make a promise to each other, like they stick to it like a crazy amount. Like they're stubborn. So at some point, like years and years later, after everything I'm going to tell you, one of the sisters, June, she admits, we made a pact at this time. We said we weren't going to speak to anybody. This is just me and my sister. So the girls ended up moving a lot because their dad's in the Royal Air Force. And most families in a military family, like, you can expect maybe to move every 2 years.
Yeah, with the posting.
Mm-hmm. So they went from Yemen to Yorkshire. And then in 71, they were transferred to Devon. And then in 74, they went to Pembrokeshire. So we're still talking about the UK here. Just I didn't know you picked a UK and I picked a UK story.
Yeah, I it's kind of funny.
So eventually the family gets to settle down in Haverford West, Wales. And so I want you to think about that. Like, Wales...
They've got a weird language there.
They have their own language, first of all. And then they have these words that are like 27 syllables.
Like that one town that the newscaster had to say that one time.
Yeah, I literally thought about playing that just so people could hear how to say it. But, like, that's my point is, like, you have girls who have been moving around a lot. Then you take them to Wales. And then you expect them to speak in a way that people who already don't understand them want to understand them. It's not going to go well. In fact, God bless my great uncle, okay? Bless his heart, I love him so much. He was born in England. He's the twin of my grandpa. But later on in his life, he moved to Wales. And I contacted him. And, when you're a little kid, you get nervous taking phone calls.
Yeah.
Well, he would call. And not only did he start to get, like, a Welsh accent... But he always had a stutter all his life, and I would get so nervous. Like, I loved to listen to him talk, and he was so sweet, but then I would get so nervous because I was trying so hard to understand what he was saying, so I would just run to my mom and, like, give her the phone. So imagine that with twins who, like, barely speak. Now they, like, the Welsh accent, oh, Lord. Anyway, so that's where they are. They're in Wales, and I've looked at the populace. And at best of times, like in 2011, like they're hitting a population in the tens of thousands.
Yeah.
And that's it's the second most populated, like, area in Wales.
Oh, God.
Not to pick on them. I grew up in an area that had, like, very few people, like 3,000 people.
Yeah.
But the point being is, like, this is a very small-ish area. It has a very strict culture, and... Frankly, there's not many black people. And that's what the twins are. Like, they're from Bahamian descent. Their parents are black. They're black. And in a lot of the articles, almost every article I read, they're the only black folk in town. But I'm going to wonder if that's true or not. But I'll put it out there for this. In the 2011 census for Haverford West, damn it. I thought I was so good at it.
Yeah. So I write down notes.
There was only 55 black people living in the city in 2011. Okay? So when we're talking about the early 70s with the twins, I mean, her family's already a family of like 5.
Yeah.
So maybe it's true. Maybe they were the only black kids going to school, but at least they had their siblings. And at the same time, like, doesn't that suck to go somewhere and, like, everyone that looks like you is basically your family?
Yeah.
Okay, this brought another memory on for me. So when I was a kid with the same great uncle, I had to do a social studies project. And I decided to do mine on whales. And my uncle not only sent me all this wonderful information, he sent me like a little thing all set up with money for the coins and like $1 and that kind of stuff. But it was really fascinating because that's not how we really function here at all.
Yeah.
But even better, he had set up a pen pal writing system between us and the local school. And I remember this for some, like, where I grew up, we grew up with a lot of white kids, black kids, and Hispanic kids. And I think we had a couple of Asian kids, and that was really it, you know? So for us to go to school with a black child was like, okay, yeah. But he let me know that the school we were contacting, and it was either the entire school or the particular class. I mean, I was 8. I barely remember.
Details are different.
Or 10 or 12. It's all the same. But the fact is there was only one black kid in the whole program that we were going to be communicating with. And that was the thing. Like, Wales doesn't have a huge black populace. In fact, I think when I was looking at the census again, it seemed like the Asian populace might even be bigger than their black populace. So they stood out, and not in a great way, because little kids can be jerks. Little kids like to pick on things that are really obvious, things that are different from themselves. And so basically these little girls were going to school and they were getting picked on for the color of their skin. They were getting picked on because of their hair was getting pulled. But it wasn't just that, it was that the girls themselves were just really odd and stood out.
Right, because they're only talking to themselves, right?
Well, they're basically not talking. They're not responding is a big thing. Like, you could come up and talk to them and they just won't even respond to you. It's like they would just stand there like little dolls and not move. And, you know, kids just don't take that well. It's a rejection in their face. And so basically their mannerisms started to mirror each other, just like the Shining twins.
Oh, great.
Oh, man. So
I was afraid to hear your story.
They would do things like they would drink tea at the exact same time, lift their cup, take a sip, lower the cup.
No.
Another time they would put on the jacket, take it off, same way. Like, it was just mirrored. When they walked down the sidewalk, one would go in front of the other. Their head would be bowed. And in step, you know, everything about them, because they've been doing this since they were itty bitty. You know what I mean? They've been playing with each other, watching each other, actually spending all that time, like, moving hand, practicing. It's called practice. And this is what they were doing. Kids were noticing it. And on top of that, I mean, they were being pretty racist. I mean, every time I actually read a quote from, like, back then, there's doctors describing them as negresses. It's the 70s.
Yeah.
I'm really quite shocked, but
I mean,
we were pretty shocked last episode at the 70s.
Yeah.
So the girls were getting picked on, and they were getting picked on so badly at this point that the school had to actually let them out early so that they could walk ahead of the other students getting out so they wouldn't get bullied on the way home. And I hear any time from like, oh, they were just let out early, all the way to like, yeah, they had to let them out like 10, 15 minutes early because it was that bad. And honestly, that's a failure on adults' end.
Absolutely.
Like, I know they were trying to do their best, but clearly, like, you just let into the bullying, and so you just gave in, you know, and you just let them go early. Like, you should have had an adult walking home with them. But again, it's the 70s.
Yep.
And the teachers and adults didn't like them. They were creeped out too.
Because they have idiosyncrasies and they move together. One
of the head teachers called Jennifer evil. Like, he was so freaked out by them.
See, I want to go that far.
Yeah, but I don't know. They weren't used to this, like, behavior. The little doll-like, can't separate, all syncretic movement. Like, it's creepy. So, the more they refused to talk to people, the more they acted alike, and then the more they got teased, the more they start pulling back into themselves and just relying on each other. And I think this is more around the time they actually made the pact not to talk to each other. Because they had tried to talk to their sister. They kind of responded a little bit. But after all the teasing over and over again, like, it kind of hit a breaking point, and they just agreed, like, it's you and me. And that's it. We won't talk to them. Later on, June would go on to explain that it was kind of like a game / it was a pact. And it was a childish pact, but the longer it went on, the more trapped they felt.
Yeah.
And then she admitted, like, it went too far, and although we longed to be normal, we couldn't break out. We tried to get back to the outside world, but it was too late. We were twins, but our personalities clashed. So, like a lot of twins that get angry when you ask them a lot of weird twin questions, they're like, no, I'm my own person. This is me.
Yeah.
These two twins were identical, but their two personalities clashed so hard. And then when they only relied on one another, it started to make this love-hate relationship start to form.
Oh.
You know, when you're a kid and you're growing up and you hit that teenage years where your hormones are going insane, and you could look in the mirror and, like, hate yourself one moment, and the next moment you think you're a 12.
Oh,
like,
well,
you're just like, woo!
I think I've always been a 15, so...
But imagine, like, getting angsty and frustrated, and then every time you turned, there was your mirror image.
Oh, yeah.
You never got away, technically, from yourself. Especially someone who's mirroring yourself. You know, like, suddenly it was more like a forced trap, and they wanted to break out, but they couldn't. At one point... Like the parents are trying to deal with this, because what happens is like, you're growing up with twins and they start acting weird, or maybe they take a little bit longer to speak to most people, and you'll hear a lot of people say, like, look, that's just a phase. That's just a thing that happens to kids, you know, who grow up in that situation.
Yeah.
Give it time. They'll grow out of that phase. And I think that's what Gloria and her husband were doing. I think they were like, okay, we'll just keep trying to talk to the girls and they'll grow out of it. Okay, well, this isn't really working. So, like, at one point, they even put the two girls in horseback riding lessons, kind of training them to do movements independent because they had to. You're on a horse, you're bouncing, like, you have to hold things different to stay, like, on board. But even this didn't work, because if one fell off a horse, the other one would instantly fall off her horse for no reason. She'd just fall off.
Would she fall off or jump off?
I don't know.
Oh, that makes it even worse.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's what they're saying about, like, how in sync they were. So, I mean, here their parents were trying to force them to learn individualistic movement, and it didn't work. You know, and it almost feels like a little bit too late. Because of this refusal to gain individuality, they start seeing therapists and just a whole array of doctors around the age of 14. I mean, this has gone on too long, and they're not really sure what to do.
Yeah.
Despite the efforts of doctors, they still refuse to speak. Like, they had made the pact, and they didn't want to speak to anybody. So doctors then took the decision upon themselves that they should just separate them, kind of like a cold turkey heroin addict. Like, this is your problem, we'll just end that problem.
Yeah, I can have a feeling that's not going to go well.
Initially, they moved into, like, a special school when they still refused to speak to anybody. Like, the doctors decided to split them up. So what it really was it was almost like the doctors had taken on this idea that the girls were just being obstinate. Like, they were just choosing not to communicate, and they needed to almost break them. Like, it almost seemed like the doctors took it personally. Is how I feel.
Yeah, it's like watching House when there's a problem he can't solve and it's not lupus.
Yeah, but with little girls, especially little girls of color in a country that has very few, like, they should be in control. These little girls shouldn't behave this way when I told them not to.
Yeah, of course.
So, in order to try and make them feel different and do their own thing, they sent the two of them off to different boarding schools. And then this plan went terribly. So both girls go to the boarding schools, and both of them start acting catatonic and completely withdrawn. They literally went stiff, and, like, it's described as being stiff and heavy like a corpse. Like, at times it took two people to try and get one out of bed, and then they would just lean them up against a wall.
Oh, okay. That's not good, but I mean, I guess if the only person you're communicating with is now gone.
Yeah, they totally shut down. They didn't want to... First of all, you just took them away from home, and then you separated them from that one person.
Yeah.
Like, why couldn't you just send them to different schools and then bring them home? You know, hey, here's that partner. You can still have her. She's never completely gone. Like, this was a really, in my opinion, a bad idea. And then it became so bad that because doctors were fearing for both their healths because of the way they were behaving, that they had to get the twins reunited. And so once the twins came home from this little adventure, they completely dropped out of school. They did not feel like being bullied anymore. They couldn't be separated. They just stayed home. They, got taught at home. And really, they completely started to withdraw at this point. So they had one room with bunk beds upstairs, that was their bedroom. And it got to the point where they no longer responded to their parents at all. Like, their parents used to ask questions, and they would at least kind of like maybe answer or respond or do whatever their parents were saying. It got to the point where the girls just spent hours upon hours in their room only talking to one another. Like, their mom could hear them chattering to each other, but she still couldn't understand what they were saying. And then if they wanted to come downstairs and maybe watch a certain program on the TV, they would
That's a bird's way of putting it.
They would leave a note. And they would be like, we would like to watch, the top 70 at 5 or whatever the nonsense was at the time. Top 50 or...
I was going to say, I don't think it's top 70. That's way too many.
I don't know. But they would leave a note, like, we would like to watch it at this time, please. Which was really just like, hey, this is the time we're coming down and maybe you can make yourself scarce. Like, it's scarce. It was the nice way to say it, I guess. But they're just not even responding at all to their mom. And at some points, like, the girls wrote in their diaries, like, I can see the pain in my mother's face, and I pray to God that he'll help me talk to my mom. They want to talk. They want to speak to other people, but at this point, it's a practice. It's a habit. They've been doing it so long that it's almost impossible to even talk to their own family.
That's terrifying.
So while they're like cloistered in their room and they're writing, they start writing a lot. Like, they're voracious readers. And that's the thing. Like, you think, oh, well, they won't speak. Maybe they can't speak because they're dumb. No, they're not. They're incredibly intelligent. They read all the time. A lot of Jane Austen. So you can see where their mindset starts going. Yeah. Very droopy and gray and
everything's gray.
English,
it's always
so
raining.
English. And they see it every day.
Here's England in all its glory. Rain and gray.
In this isolation that they get into, like, they start writing, and a big habit of theirs is to write a lot of, like, fantasy and fiction.
Okay.
So they end up going on to film notebook after notebook with writing. And their hopes and dream was that one day they would become famous authors. It would break them out of this life. Like, something was going to basically rescue them.
Yeah.
They both knew that something was wrong, but they were relying on this weird life change to happen to them to save them. And that was going to be their writing. And so they got so interested in writing, even though they were like in homeschool, that they even sent off to do a mail order course in creative writing. And they took it as like the same person, because who cares? Like, you're both whatever. And so each girl is writing in her own notebook. Like, they don't share a notebook. They don't like write together. Like, they're just both writing. And they often like played with their dolls as they were growing up and wrote like skits and weird dramatic like stuff for them, especially like how they all happen to die.
Oh, that's,
I mean, honestly,
great.
We'd say that's so creepy and weird, but we all did it. We all did those weird, dumb games, and like death is like one of those fascinating things when you're younger.
No one died in my games.
Oh man, everybody died in mine. So, all right. So they were both writing about things that they never had actually experienced. So they were writing really fantastical stories about like crime and prostitution and sexuality and just all sorts of things, that the way a teenager would write when they don't actually know anything about it.
Yeah.
And so they actually wrote a number of novels. So June would end up writing at least 2 novels. Jennifer wrote 3. The stories all centered around exotic places and like I said, exotic places and theories that they didn't know about, like, things they had no clue of. Most of their stories would center around like California, here in the United States. Their little girl, the girls in Wales, England, like they have no idea what they're talking about.
overexposed photos and
Yeah, they're living on magazines and television and pop things. Like, it's true.
Yeah.
A lot of our intercultural, like, ways we used to do things, you used to go to different countries and different counties and different states, and it would be, like, really intensely different because each person did their own thing. Now we all watch the same TV programs and listen to the same music, and, accents are going away.
Yeah, and you look at TV and stuff like that. You look at like the show like The OC back in the day, or Californication, and they all had the same. Like they take Hollywood and like Orange County area in California, and they make it the same, and everyone's eating kale 3 meals a day.
Yeah,
and it's something that if I say that sort of stuff, it's what people can think about. It's not a far stretch for people to get that in California.
So, mostly their stories centered around California. June writes a story, or a novel rather, called Pepsi Cola Addict. It's set in Malibu, California, and it's about a high school hero who was seduced by a teacher and later sent to a reformatory where a homosexual guard terrorized him.
Oh.
They write about really dark things, but they have no concept of what that's really like.
Yeah, that's
in
terrifying.
June's novel, Discomania, she writes a story about a young woman that discovers that a local disco incites patrons to act of insane violence. So but here's the thing I do have to say about that. When you're in creative writing, you write about things you don't know. You're trying to make an interesting story. What interests you? Well, let's now exaggerate that like tenfold. Like, I took a creative writing story in college and I wrote like a crazy serial killer story. It doesn't make me a serial killer, but I'm sure that the girl I had like read it and edit it for me thought I was crazy. Now that I look back, like, I got really intense in that.
Well, I mean, you look at where you're at now, so...
But you know what? Like, without people writing about things they don't know, like, we wouldn't have Stephen King. Guess what? Stephen King doesn't bring animals back to life. Otherwise,
Are you sure? Have you been to his house?
He would have his cat back. Look, the point...
Have you seen his dog?
I'm just saying, like, I find a lot of the times that we do research on crime stories and we're like, oh, this person was bipolar, or this person wrote weird stories, or this person... That's just people. Like, there's plenty of people who do that and they don't turn into, like, crazy killers or crazy, like, crime-ridden people.
Yeah.
Like, they're just normal folks. It's just we happen to pick up on their hobbies and then point it out if we think it's weird. I don't think them writing, like, ludicrous stuff was weird.
No, not necessarily. I think, and that's like, especially nowadays, you look at, let's go to the dredges of the internet and go to Tumblr. You got all sorts of weird stuff going on there, and people don't have any experience. They're 14.
Yeah.
You
can read it and tell it's written by a 14-year-old.
Yeah, you are level 0 in a life.
This is what it's like for the girls. They're like 16, 17. They're writing stories. They're not terrible, terrible stories. They're just clearly stories of a 16, 17-year-old girl. But that's not the only thing that the girls are writing about. The girls also have individual diaries that their mom gave them for Christmas that year. It's little, lock-up diaries. And it really, like, nobody had really seemed to bother reading their diaries, and I wish their parents had, because it would have really let her know what was going on.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they're weird and creepy, but you think that they're each other's everything. Turns out, like, the love-hate relationship is going, like, intense love, intense hate. It's at dangerous levels. So they're thinking really dark things. And so in her diary, June wrote, quote, "Nobody suffers the way I do. Not with a sister. With a husband, yes. With a wife, yes. With a child, yes. But this sister of mine, a dark shadow robbing me of sunlight, is my one and only torment."
Oh, I don't like that at all.
Wait for it. Jennifer wrote, "We have become fatal enemies in each other's eyes. We feel the irritating, deadly rays come out of our bodies, stinging each other's skin. I say to myself, can I get rid of my own shadow? Impossible or not possible? Without my shadow, would I die? Without my shadow, would I gain life, be free, or left to die? Without my shadow, which I identify with the face of misery, deception, murder."
Oh.
They're never alone. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they're honestly feeling trapped, and they're seeing it in each other's eyes. And honestly, maybe if you believe in any kind of physiological, psychological, like supernatural powers. I mean, I would say that a lot of people would almost see this in a shamanistic way.
Yeah.
Almost like a physical, psychological attack on the other. And they feel it because they're so connected. Like, their empathy for each other is so close. And what's worse is it wasn't like the twins didn't realize that they both had animosity for each other. Like, they felt it.
Yeah.
So,
you can't hide that sort of stuff, I don't think.
No, but they wrote about it for sure because they didn't have anybody to talk. If you can't talk to anybody and the only person you can talk to is the one that you think hates you and you hate them, where do you go? So Jennifer wrote, quote, "She wants us to be equal. There is a murderous gleam in her eye. Dear Lord, I am scared of her. She is not normal. Someone is driving her insane. It is me."
Oh.
Like, that's like an insane depth of like knowing oneself and knowing another, and to know like you need to get away. But they've already gone through this. Every time they know they need to be separated, they've asked this. They've asked their parents in notes and stuff, like, can you send me to America? Can you send me to Barbados? Like, they want to be separated, but I think that when it comes to the time of separating them, like, they can't handle it.
Yeah, they want to be apart, but then they don't know.
Yeah, because when you force it and tell them, like, you're not going to see your sister, they go catatonic. They can't bear the idea of that. But nobody ever tried to just, here's a vacation for you. Like, no.
Yeah.
So, that's Jennifer. Meanwhile, June, in turn, writes at the same time, quote, "I feel like suicide, but will it help? I have fresh marks on my face to prove how distressing life is becoming with my twin sister. Have I strength to kill her?" It's getting, like, really, really bad.
Yeah, this is super dark.
They're getting violent towards each other. There's scratches on each other's face. At one point, June even tried to kill Jennifer by drowning her.
Oh,
but it didn't. I'm sure maybe they're like, oh, sisters. I don't know what the hell they were thinking.
No,
but
I feel like there's a. I've not really shown.
There's a disconnect.
I feel like there's a definite line where it's just like, oh, that's just siblings fighting and
no, and
bickering.
there's a point where parents are supposed to step in.
Yeah.
But by the time they're both 18, they're completely disgruntled with their lives, with each other, and they're frustrated because they thought they were going to be famous by now. Like, they've literally spent like the last 3 or 4 years in their bedroom, like, writing away. And like all children do, all teenagers do, they think it's amazing, and like they have dreams of being famous, and this will work, They
yeah, of course.
Even though they're editing, they don't realize like how much people here know, and they're not prepared for that.
Yeah.
So one of the sisters even basically gets like self-published. She does manage to get something in like a magazine. The other sister doesn't get anything at all. And basically by 18, they're frustrated and they're really angry. And, like I said, the whole point of becoming famous, the whole point of being famous writers is that they wanted to break out. They wanted to start a new life. And in their own words, they wanted to be considered more than black and daft. Because where they lived, they were basically the only black girls. They stood out because they were twins, and they were considered mutes.
Yeah.
So everyone just thought they were stupid. And they, as you can see, they're incredibly intelligent.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So everyone thinks you're stupid, and then you are incapable of actually speaking to them where they can understand you, and you get frustrated, and it doesn't work out. So they start, of course, going through all these hormonal changes, and they also start thinking about sex and love and the things that every person who becomes an adult thinks about.
Yeah.
And at 18, like, they're making a decision, like, we have to start making our own moves. We have to start breaking out because writing's not making us famous.
Right.
And so they start, like I said, they start breaking out by, like, committing a lot of violence against each other. There's a lot of frustration, so violence breaks out. They're scratching each other, they're choking each other. There's a lot of fighting. And yet they'll turn around and beg for forgiveness. I love you, like, love-hate relationship.
It's like a Stockholm type of thing.
It is. At another point, because of the whole we want to, hormones and sex and love, they decide they need to lose their virginity. And they've been going to homeschool, so they're not as close to whoever would be in town anymore. There had been an American boy who was on the RAF post.
Yeah.
Because his dad was posted there, but he was an American. And he had always stood up for them. So that kind of stayed in their mind. And they were like, well, maybe him. So at this point, the girls were about 10 miles away from the Air Force Base where people would have been located.
Yeah.
And they started taking taxis to go towards where they thought the boy lived. And what they didn't realize was he didn't live there anymore. I think he was old enough to go off to school.
Yeah.
But his brothers lived there. And so at one point, the girls go over there. And you have to picture it. They're wearing wigs. Long brown hair wigs.
That's
because they're very self-conscious about their hair and how they look.
Yeah, I guess it's you're in a white town. You got
black hair.
Yeah,
it's
hair.
Different. It's not nappy, but it's different, and it's a different texture, and it takes different care, and they're being made fun of for it. So they're self-conscious about it. So they're wearing wigs to kind of attract the white American boy. They get to the house, and it's empty. It's not empty, like their stuff's all there, but nobody's home.
Right.
That's a better way to put it. And so they break in. They make, like, I think peanut butter sandwiches. They go look over all the boys' clothing, and they're looking at the pictures on the wall. And then the boy's dad and his wife come home, and the girls tried to run off, but they, like, couldn't quite make it out. And so they got caught. But being who they are, they refused to speak. And so eventually, I mean, I'm guessing because this guy worked at this base, their father, who's a black Bahamian, works at this base, and he's got two black twins. I'm pretty sure he knows exactly who they are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He knows exactly who those girls are.
Yeah, so basically he just starts to feel bad. He doesn't think they stole anything, and he like lets them go, like, okay, whatever, you know, run home, don't do it again, kind of thing. And so they get away with it, but it doesn't stop them. They actually keep spending all their money to take these taxis out there, and they finally kind of meet up with the boys' younger brothers who are more around their age.
Yeah.
And they manage to start kind of dating them. And so, like, the girls...
How does that work if they're not talking?
So here's the thing. Like, they were so determined to get this done. Like, they were like, we want to lose our virginity.
Yeah.
So they would take 3 hours to get ready, the whole wig, the lipstick. They talked about buying gum, getting dressed. I mean, I wonder if their parents saw this and at least hoped that, okay, maybe they're trying to go out. Like, oh goodness, maybe they're finally getting into society or something. But what they didn't know was that the girls were starting to rely on alcohol and drugs to open up their personalities.
Oh.
So not only are they wearing crazy wigs, but now they're drinking like brandy because that's all they're probably finding in this town.
Yeah, a social lubricant.
And they're actually they're huffing glue, which is weird to me.
Not so weird. I mean, it's like maybe the glue is different than what we're thinking. Like,
I don't know.
Are you thinking like the White Elmer's glue?
I'm honestly thinking it's probably more like the like model glue.
Yeah, and that oh god, yeah, that stuff you're not supposed to sniff at all.
But people do, and then on top of that, they're also smoking pot, which, you know, this combined, it's enough to lower their inhibitions, or maybe even it's a lot. You're a teenager who's never drank, yeah, it's enough to lower your inhibitions.
Oh, easily.
And they find themselves able to laugh. They're able to talk out loud. They're able to talk and be understood. But then again, this is something they wanted. Maybe that's what it really takes.
Yeah.
At some point in dating these guys, they date them for about 5 weeks. But at some point, they all break into a church base, and one of them loses their virginity. I think a week later, the other one goes ahead and loses her virginity because she wanted to match her twin.
Right, of course.
And the whole time that this is happening, they're yelling out like things the same way a virgin would yell out stuff from a porn because they think that's what you do. Yeah. Like, they're saying stuff that they have no idea what they're saying because it's sexy, maybe, kind of, question mark. And so, like I said, it only lasts about like 5 weeks, and they had really differing like feelings about it. One twin really, she felt like that was one portion of freedom.
Yeah.
Like, I've done this, and it felt like this, but I felt joy, and it's mine, and I succeeded in accomplishing it. Like, hooray. The other one, June, she ended up writing this, quote, "I have no feelings for sex. I think it's mean and cruel. I just lie back and let it happen. I want romance and emotional attachment. Boys just use my body." So I feel like she literally just went through with it because her sister went through with it. It's another one of those control things. You know, maybe she didn't want to. It doesn't sound like she wants to.
Not at all. Not to me.
So that's, like I said, everyone thinks they're so similar, especially because they act so similar, but they're not similar. And it hurts when they're not the same person. Kind of like when you said the one twin is getting upset because you don't remember this and it like really upsets them.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be the same. You should know. Well, this is how the twins feel like when they don't go through with the same thing or they don't agree on the same thing. It's a problem. Then this isn't enough. Like the sex, the drugs, the alcohol, it's not enough. They haven't gotten out of the house. Their writing isn't going anywhere. And they go on a 5-week spree of petty crime and arson. And it really actually starts to grow. So it's 1982. They're 19 years old in a somewhat small city. According to June, they were doing things like breaking into the Portfield Special School and stealing magazines. And, you know, they're breaking windows. They're stealing glue
They're being delinquents.
They're literally being delinquents. They're just being stupid teenagers, kind of a little too late in their life to be pulling this shit.
Yeah, it's like when you're 15, 16, you do that.
Yeah,
shit.
They're like spray painting shit. They're stealing glue. They're stealing magazines. The problem is then it starts to like expand. Like they start to set fire to stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, and so basically her reasoning for this is that June says, you know, they were bored. They had nothing to do. The boys were no longer dating them. I think they left. And they were really cruel when they did it, too. The girls begged them for, like, a memento. Like, give me something to remember you by. And you should give them, like, a little love note or something sweet.
Yeah.
One of the boys gave him, like, an old pair of socks. Another boy gave him gave her a dirty shirt and a picture. Like, it was just, like, it was incredibly rude.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessary. And it just was an extra way of going, like, you don't mean shit to us. You know? Like, you could have been sweet, but... You know, after they left like that, the girls were acting out. And so, you know, it kept growing. It seemed like they kept getting away with it, and then it kept growing, and they made some really bad decisions. So then, on October 24th in 1981, they set a tractor shed on fire.
Oh.
So this is a huge issue.
Yeah.
Then on November 28th, so you can see how fast it's starting to, like, expand, they smashed a window at the Pembroke Technical College, and then police happened to catch them just as they were trying to set a fire there. So they're really, like, getting out of hand, but this is the first time they get caught, right?
Yeah.
With this being the first time they get caught, they're still charged with 16 charges of burglary, theft, and arson.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Better go home.
And it's early 80s, and they're the only black folk in town, and, like, they're basically in trouble. What happens? Oh, well, their lawyers urge them to make a guilty plea. Because they're so weird and strange, I think the lawyers just assume, like, oh, they'll get you a guilty plea, and then we'll work this, like, you know, insane, you know, side of it, and we'll just get away with it. So then they start getting, like, tested. Like, doctors start looking them over, start looking through their past about them not talking. And so they start saying that the twins have a severe social disorder and that they're psychopathic.
I'll agree with the social disorder thing, but...
And here's the worst part. Because they're, you know, mentally unstable, according to the doctors who are looking them over, the judge ends up handing down a sentence that's indeterminate. Like, he's like, you're just going to go away until you show signs of getting better.
Oh, that's not good.
He starts that sentence on June 20th, 1982, and then they have to go to a high-security mental facility. So what that means is you're going to a criminal mental facility.
I don't think they need that.
No.
I think that's a little bit above and beyond.
I mean, later on, the girls say, this is something like a petty theft, like thievery, like bullshit, teenage bullshit.
Yeah.
You would maybe get 2 years. These girls got an indefinite sentence. that ended up sending them to the Broadmoor Hospital for the next 11 years of their fucking life. Yes. So they were the youngest patients to ever be there. And patients who were at this psychiatric facility included people like the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, or gang members like Ronnie and Reggie Cray. I mean, these were hardened criminals, rapists, murderers, like bad guys. And then you have these weird twins who have like a psychological issue where they just don't want to talk to people, and then they start to act out.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Why are they here together? You know, like...
Yeah, one of these doesn't match the others.
One of these things is not like the other. Yeah. So, I mean, their sister Greta ended up saying, like, years and years later, like, the older sister was like, they should have never been there. Like, that was wrong. They didn't, they did something wrong, but they didn't kill anybody. And by putting them there, you ruin their lives. Like, you're always saying, like, oh, we're putting them in these facilities to rehabilitate, to fix people. We believe in second chances. No, they just locked these girls away and were like, you're weird and you're denying us. It was almost like every time they did this, it was like a slap in the face to authority, and authority couldn't handle it. And it was all over making someone talk.
Yeah.
Like, who cares if you talk or not? Like, just don't set shit on fire.
Yeah.
So...
they're doing something that people don't understand, so that becomes insane or abnormal.
Well, and then when you get them there and they're being punished in such a extreme way, they react. Again, they're still teenagers. They're hormonal. And now you're like, they're going to a really crazy place. And what's the first thing they try and do? They try and separate them. When they first get there, the girls do the same thing that they always do when they go somewhere strange and almost get separated. They become unresponsive. They become lethargic. Sometimes they get violent if anyone tried to separate them, obviously. And sometimes they wouldn't get violent to the nurses and doctors. They would get violent at each other. Yeah. For trying to separate them. It's almost like they didn't even know why they were doing it. June went into a catatonic state, and at one point, or many points, she tried to commit suicide while she was at this hospital.
That's not good.
Jennifer lashed out at a nurse in one article called an animalistic rage. But
it's probably scratching is what it is.
Yeah, so they put a title on it that was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's just...
But the point is like, yeah, I think if you put me in a crazy house, yeah, I'm gonna get a little animalistic myself. Like, I'm gonna lash out to whatever's trying to touch me. Yeah, because, you know what? I believe every person has a primal instinct of survival. Yeah. And you get put in one of these places, and oh my God, you let that go. You let that take care of you, because that's how you survive.
Yeah, it's the primal instinct.
But, this sounds really intense for these girls who have really been doing nothing more than writing in their room. I mean, they have been dating lately. You can't see that at some point they can talk normal. So why do people seem to think that they're so insane? They literally call them psychopaths.
Yeah, I think like I said, I think social disorder is probably proper. Psychopath is a bit above and beyond.
Yeah. Well, once they get to the hospital, they do actually start acting really erratically, and they're not themselves. And a big part has to do with the fact that they both get put on high doses of antipsychotic medications, and they're not even on the same medications. Like, oh, let's try this one on this one, and let's try this one on that one.
Is Nazi Germany?
It's just, it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't do them well, and they're on ridiculous levels of dosage. So at some points, like, they're groggy, their eyesight is almost doubled, like, they can't even write. Like, that's their one escape, and they can't do it anymore because they can't concentrate enough to actually make a thought or, like, write it down. So, yeah, their sister's right. Like, this literally changed them forever. And of course, because this is also strange between the miniature crime spree and then finding out that these girls are so, like, strange and weird, and they're doing, like, weird stuff at the hospital. So they're on all this medication, and then the hospital decides to separate them. And so they put each girl in a cell on the completely opposite end of the hospital.
Oh, that's going to go real well.
And yet, while they're separated, they start doing really weird shit in sync still. And it's got the staff, like, completely puzzled. Like, one habit is, like, one day, one twin would completely gorge herself. Like, that's how they would put it. Like, they definitely had some weird body dysmorphia where, like, they were very intent on being skinny, but when they were upset, they would eat, like, way more than they wanted to. Teenage thing, honestly. But one would eat all fucking day, or as much as she wanted, while the other one just refused to eat that day. Then the next day, they would switch. But they weren't together. They just knew this. And then sometimes, while they were completely separated, they would freeze in really weird gestures. Like, it would almost be like, make a strange gesture with your arms. Like, whatever you want. Pretend you're catching a fish in midair. Now just stay like that. They would see one girl doing this in her cell, walk all the way across to the other end of the hospital where this girl wouldn't have any connection with her sister, nobody would have told her, and she'd be in the same position, just frozen, standing there.
I don't like, no. See, I couldn't...
So this, of course, freaked, like, the staff out. Not only are they weird and violent, and, like, they have their own freakouts, but now they're just doing, like, this weird mirror shit, and they're not even, like, together.
That's exactly how they probably said. The weird mirror shit twins.
Especially at night. The night staff probably hated that place.
No. Okay. Am I back at the first cell? What the hell happened?
So, they're just doing all sorts of weird stuff, and it draws attention. And, of course, there's, news articles about them, and people actually paying attention. And one of those people is a journalist named Marjorie Wallace, and she kind of takes it upon herself to not only interview the girls. She goes home and she reads every speck of paper they ever written that's, like, left behind in their room.
Yeah.
And she almost kind of, in her mind, becomes friends with these girls. Like, she'll come regularly on a weekend and have tea with them. And the girls talk to her. Like, they're opening up to her again. And that was the thing. Like, they were told, hey, you're stuck here until you prove to us that you're kind of normal and should get out. And so at points they would be like, yeah, okay, we'll talk to you. Like, every time they told them they were going to separate them, they'd lose their minds and be like, no, okay, we'll talk. And then the next day they just wouldn't talk. But that's because you were forcing it on them.
And you want the answer that you want to hear, so they're giving it to you.
So Marjorie thinks she gets to know them pretty great, and she admits, like, they have a really good, like, writing personality. But she can even see that, like, the twins are almost, like, controlled by each other. And again, this has come up in, like, past, doctor reports about the girls. Like, at one point, a doctor admits, who was used to, like, practicing on selective mutes. She was like, when I met the girls, I realized that June was controlling Jennifer with eye signals. You could tell that June wanted to talk. But by, like, little flickers of her sister's eyes, they would be communicating, and the other one would be like, no, we have a like, no, but
that's insane.
Think about it this way. I've heard about this with, like, not to be insensitive, but dog training.
Yeah.
I've known of people who have had dogs, security dogs, that weren't just trained in, like, words. They were literally trained in hand signals and eye signals.
See, I've heard hand signals. I learned how to do that with a lab once.
Yeah, but eye signals...
But eye signals is like a...
That was a really big thing, especially, like, in the 80s for especially, like, drug lords. Like, they wanted security dogs who couldn't be infiltrated. Like, they were trained not to eat unless this one particular person watched them to eat. They were trained so that if you were tied up, you could make a signal with your eyes and they would understand you. Like, they're insanely smart dogs, but, like, that's something that I would say then is on a more primal level again, because if an animal can do it, humans can do it. And since these girls have been mirroring each other since they were children, they could tell each other, and it was just these insignificant little movements, but it was enough to control the other. Whoever was the strongest twin could control the other and force them not to be able to talk to anybody.
That's some crazy shit.
So now, they're in this hospital, and people are starting to kind of realize this between reading their diaries and how much they almost hate each other, and them basically begging to they both wanted to get out. They both wanted to get to the outside world, and Marjorie kind of saw this, and she wrote this whole book about the silent twins. And she even kind of warned the staff, like, look, I think something bad might happen. Like, you really need to keep an eye on the girls and figure something out because this isn't working.
Right.
Because the innate anger was really starting to build. And so, for a while they became quite famous, but like it didn't come to anything. And it's not like anybody really helped them.
Yeah, it's just an oddity.
I think eventually, though, through, like, the media exposure, people started to realize, like, these girls didn't get what they deserve. They shouldn't have been in this, like, high-security facility. Like, clearly they need some kind of help, but it's not that kind of place, Like, what the hell were they doing there? And so, eventually, they knew their time was coming up that they were either going to be released or they were going to be moved to another facility. And the girls started having all these arguments for months on months. They started to, like, staff noticed that they were fighting, but I don't think they could even tell what they were fighting about because they were probably reverting to their individual, like, twin speak of the sped up English.
Yeah.
Eventually, at 29 years old, Jennifer confided in Marjorie and her 10-year-old daughter during one of their tea sessions and said, quote, "I'm going to die. We've decided."
Oh, God.
And so...
That sent chill down my spine.
Yeah, together, after all that arguing, the arguing was over who was going to do it. But basically, they had decided that if they were to be moved to another facility, one of them needed to sacrifice herself so the other one could have an actual chance of living a life.
Oh, jeez.
That they wanted to be separated so badly, but were so incapable of doing it, that if the opportunity came up, they were just, that was going to have to happen. So who was it going to be? So I think it became an innate fight through the twins, through the sisters, of who had the stronger personality. So in 1993, the twins were finally transferred. They were transferred to Caswell Clinic, which was a way less, like, intensely controlled facility.
Less secure.
Yeah. They were basically in the process of gaining their freedom. You think they would have been, like, really happy and excited. And in fact, they said, like, yeah, they did seem a little bit more talkative. They seemed giggly. But Jennifer had actually been showing signs of being ill for a couple days before the move. Her speech was slurred. She just didn't look good, basically. And then the day that they're going to be moved, the two girls get in the back seat together, and Jennifer lays her head in June's lap, and she's just, like, laying there, but her eyes are open. And it's almost like described like she's gone to sleep, but her eyes are open. But by the time they get to the Caswell Clinic, they open the door, and Jennifer's non-responsive. Like, she basically crumbles. And the doctors go and start trying to take care of her. And, at this point, she's about 31 in age. And in 2 hours, she's dead.
Jeez.
And they have no reason for it.
I was going to say, was it anything that she was taking or something? Or
I mean, basically, they do an autopsy. They determine that Jennifer's death has been caused by a sudden case of lethal inflammation of the heart. Like, basically, she's had a heart attack, but she's 31.
Yeah.
And, they also do another test, like, does she have any drugs or poison, or, did they give her the wrong medication? Like, they saw she was on, like, high dosage of medication for what she's always been on, but nothing that they didn't expect to find.
Okay.
So there's no poison. There's no reason for this. Like, to this day, people kind of still want to know, like, why did she really die? The only thing that people at the first facility said was, well, if she was ill, she would have never been transported. Like, we wouldn't have done that. And that's all that they'll say on that.
Right.
So not only are they really not taking, like, blame for it, but they just don't have an explanation for it. It gets crazier. June would later declare that, as Jennifer died, her last words were, "At long last, we're out." I don't know. That's, the survivor writes the history.
Yeah, it's his story.
Yeah. And so she's gone, and she's buried. Her headstone has a poem from June on it, and it says, "We once were two, we two made one, we no more two, through life be one, rest in peace." Again, love-hate. She still loved her sister, and this was they said, "This is my shadow, this is me." But she clearly like, it gets creepy because Marjorie goes and visits her like a couple days later just to, how are you? Are you okay? And June is expressing like crazy emotions. Of course, she's grieving, she's sad, but she's also like celebrating.
Like hopeful in a way.
She literally says, I'm free at last, liberated. And at last, Jennifer has given up her life for me. I mean, she just flat out says, like, she died for me. She did it.
Yeah.
We did this so I could be free, so we could be free. She literally says, the two of us are war weary. Like, this had been a battle, and it had been a long one. And that someone had to break the vicious cycle. And that person had been Jennifer. Jennifer had to die. And it's like almost as soon as Jennifer died, June starts to speak normally. She starts to speak to people. People can understand her.
Yeah.
It's like as if it was a Disney movie and a curse was broken and she can suddenly just be a normal person.
Well, that's chilling.
It's so strange. And in fact, they even free her from psychiatric care.
Like how much longer did it take?
I mean, she'd literally been in psychiatric care for like 11 to 12 years.
Right, but I mean at the new facility, I guess.
Not long. Like, right, pretty soon after that. And that's the crazy thing. Like, here they did some minor... That's the thing that should be pointed out. They did minor infractions. Things that they shouldn't have done. But there's a slap on the wrist, be it, hey, you have to do probation or you have to do a year. Like, you don't do this. But you don't put somebody away for what's essentially life.
And into like a mental institute, high security mental institute.
Yeah.
Like prison, like
young
to me,
teenage girls with rapists and murderers and crazy people.
Yeah, to me there's the criminally insane and the criminals, and those are two completely different groups.
And it put them in a desperate situation. Like, every step of the way, it seemed like they didn't do the right thing to try. Like, it almost seemed like they tried, but they really didn't try.
Yeah.
And overall, like, the psychology of it all, like, I've always believed, you know, some people can will it so. Like, sometimes you see those old couples that have been together for 70 years and they lose their partner, and then the one goes really fast because they just don't wanna.
That happened to my cousin. Their grandparents, one died on, like, the 24th of a month, and the other died on the 25th.
Yeah, I think people are very capable of controlling their body and their life source, and it's a lot of that of I give up, I'm done, and I think it's almost possible. I think that's
what it sounds like on this one.
Yeah, I feel like these two have been battling forever and just didn't see another out from each other.
Yeah.
And, you know, they've been locked up in this facility on these crazy drugs. Like, they just lost touch with reality and didn't see another out. But basically, at this point, June's still alive.
What's she doing now?
She moved home. She lives very close to her parents. She used to work at a Barnardo's charity shop.
All right.
But I think her personality over the time, like she really celebrated when this first happened. I think she really did think life was going to change. She was going to open up. And again, something would happen for her to open up her life. And it didn't really happen, but at least she can express herself and she doesn't feel trapped. So she went home. Her family rallied around her. She worked for a little bit, but, you know, her personality, she is kind of, you know, quiet and reserved. So I think she stopped doing that. She cleans her mom's house once a week. And, you know, her family's frustrated. Her family says that a lot of these decisions were basically made for them, that they weren't really given the choice as to where the girls went or what happened to them. And in that case, they felt like that caused them to lose a daughter.
Yeah.
And it caused their other daughter to lose her future. You know, she was intelligent, she was creative, but through all the things she went through, she hasn't found the ability to, like, break out of that and be normal. She can't have a relationship. She can't have a marriage. She's never going to have kids. And that makes them sad. You always want your kid to be able to get better.
To be the happiest they can be.
And, yeah, that's the thing with them. So that's the weird twin story.
I mean, like, it's such a weird situation. Then it got, like...
Is it? Like, here's the thing I want people to think about with their little thinking cap and, like, break the psychology down, maybe send me a letter and tell me what you think, but I'm thinking that, like, was this a weird thing that happened because they were twins and they really had a psychological connection where they could hear each other, or they were forced to be with each other? Or was this something that any person could have happen to them if they were to grow up with the same person, mirror each other, like if they were to cause a habit that they built a dependency on one another? Could this happen to anybody, not a twin?
I think it's almost like, how do I want to say this? I'm not trying to be, you got Mowgli syndrome, like a wild child who's kind of raised up, and parents aren't necessarily interacting with the child and they lock them in a room. We'll cover that in an episode, I can promise you guys that. But it's almost like if you center your entire life around a deficiency in a way. Like, this one is a made deficiency because you're focusing on your twins, so you're kind of putting out the rest of the world. It almost seems like that's kind of like what was going through my head is like,
yeah,
there's
it's like
something
choosing that your left foot doesn't work, so then your left foot just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, you caused this, but at some point it is a problem. Whether or not you caused it, it's something that's happening now.
Yeah, and it's not anything that could have been inherently wrong with them. Like, maybe they didn't need to be on any medication, but just the way they went for the first 18 years, 29 years, let's say, that you just kind of, they grew up into this weird niche, and it's hard to break out of it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not something, it's above my pay grade.
The chilling aspect, though, is definitely that whole, like, suicide by belief type of thing.
It's really sad. I mean, like I said, they were beautiful, creative women, and I really wish Jennifer had the opportunity to build her own life and move on. Like, it's sad that they felt like one had to go for the other. And it's creepy. It just creeps me out.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit odd. I'm not a big fan of it, but
that's it. That's
not as bad as some of our stories.
Yeah.
It's more one of those mysteries, make you think episodes here.
And that'll be it for us for this week. So please, once again, we'll do our normal begging over here, and we'll ask you, please, please, please go to iTunes, give us a review, hopefully a 5-star. Let us know what you think, if we're doing a good thing or what you like about us. And if you want to communicate with us, send us an email over at snafoodpodcast@gmail.com.
That's snafood with a D.
Yeah, and or you can contact us on Instagram. We also answer a lot of things over there. And we're still collecting our stories for your Snafood Stories to tell at once a month. And if you get it in now, we could probably fit it into this first episode. We are starting to actually get enough stories, which makes me very, very excited.
It does. You should see her. Whenever she gets any messages, like, because, we both manage the accounts, but Shannon is the one who's on the Instagram more often than me. She gets super giddy when she gets the messages, and
yeah, so it matters. We really do love you guys.
I come home from work, and she's all sorts of excited, and it's always a nice feeling to see that you guys are reaching out to us and you're enjoying our stories.
Okay, so till next time, you guys, we'll see you later.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye.